In 1974, psychologists Tversky and Kahneman conducted a now classic experiment. They asked participants to estimate within 5 seconds the product of a sequence of numbers. One group was presented with the sequence 8 times, 7 times, 6 times, 5 times, 4 times, 3 times, 2 times 1. The other group saw the same numbers, but in reverse order: 1 times, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, 6 times, 7 times, 8. Logically, of course, the answer is identical, but the first impression, that initial anchor, dramatically skewed the results. The median estimate for the ascending sequence was 512. For the descending sequence, starting with the larger numbers, a whopping 2,250. The actual answer is 40,320. Both groups wildly underestimated, but the group exposed to the larger numbers first anchored their estimates significantly higher. This, in a nutshell, is the anchoring bias. It's not just about numbers. Think about the last time you negotiated a salary. Did the first number mentioned, whether it was your expectation or the employer's offer, seem to stick in your mind, influencing the entire negotiation? Or consider buying a house. Does the initial asking price, even if you know it's inflated, somehow set the baseline for what you perceive as a reasonable offer? This is the anchoring bias at work, subtly but powerfully shaping your decisions, and you're probably experiencing it dozens of times a day without even realizing it. The anchoring bias is a cognitive shortcut, a heuristic that your brain uses to make quick judgments. Your brain loves efficiency, and grappling with complex information takes time and energy. So when faced with uncertainty, it latches onto the first piece of information it receives, the anchor, and uses that as a reference point for all subsequent evaluations. This initial anchor acts like a gravitational pull, influencing your judgment even if you know it's irrelevant or arbitrary. Why are you so susceptible to this? Well, it's deeply ingrained in how your brain processes information. There are 2 primary cognitive processes at play: System 1 and System 2 thinking. System 1 is your fast, intuitive, and emotional response system. It's responsible for those gut reactions and quick judgments. System 2 is your slower, more deliberate and logical thinking process. It's the one you use for complex problem-solving and analysis. The anchoring bias thrives on System 1 thinking. It's that initial, almost subconscious grab for the first available information. Now you might be thinking, okay, I understand the concept, but how does this actually play out in real-world negotiations and decisions? Let's look at some specific scenarios. Imagine you're negotiating the price of a used car. The seller lists it for $15,000. That number, even if you know it's above market value, becomes your anchor. You might counter with $12,000, feeling like you're getting a good deal. But what if the seller had initially listed it for $18,000? Your counteroffer might have been closer to $14,000 or $15,000, still feeling like a bargain, even though it's higher than your original offer in the first scenario. The seller, in this case, has strategically used the anchoring bias to their advantage. This happens in salary negotiations all the time. The initial salary offer, whether it comes from you or the employer, sets the stage for the entire discussion. If the employer starts low, it's much harder to negotiate a significantly higher salary. Conversely, if you confidently state your desired salary range first, and it's higher than what the employer had in mind, you've potentially anchored the negotiation in your favor. It's not just about money, either. Consider choosing a career path. Let's say you're passionate about both art and technology. You receive an offer for a well-paying tech job before you hear back from any art-related opportunities. That tech job offer, with its concrete salary and benefits, can become an anchor, making it harder to objectively evaluate potentially less lucrative, but perhaps more fulfilling, artistic pursuits. The first concrete offer, even if it's not your ideal career, can exert a powerful pull. The implications extend to investment decisions. Imagine you're considering investing in a particular stock. You see a news report predicting a significant price increase. That prediction, even if from a questionable source, can become your anchor. You might be more likely to invest and even to hold on to the stock longer than you should, even if the market indicators suggest otherwise. You're anchored to that initial optimistic prediction. So how can you mitigate the effects of this pervasive bias? Awareness is the first and perhaps most crucial step. Simply knowing that the anchoring bias exists and that you are susceptible to it makes you more vigilant. When you encounter a situation where a number or a piece of information is presented early on, consciously ask yourself, is this a relevant and reasonable anchor, or is it arbitrarily influencing my judgment? Secondly, do your research. Before entering any negotiation or making a significant decision, gather as much independent information as possible. If you're buying a car, research the fair market value. If you're negotiating a salary, research industry benchmarks and salary ranges for similar positions. Having your own data points helps you establish a more objective anchor, reducing the influence of the other party's initial offer. Thirdly, consider multiple perspectives. Actively seek out alternative viewpoints and challenge your own assumptions. Ask yourself, what are the potential downsides? What are the other possibilities? This helps to broaden your perspective and avoid getting fixated on a single anchor. Fourthly, in negotiations, try to be the one to set the first anchor, but do it strategically. If you're selling something, start with a reasonably high but justifiable price. If you're buying, make a well-researched but ambitious low offer. This doesn't guarantee success, but it shifts the negotiation landscape in your favor. Fifthly, be willing to walk away. This is perhaps the most powerful tool against the anchoring bias. Knowing your bottom line and being prepared to walk away if that line isn't met prevents you from getting caught up in the emotional pressure of the negotiation and making concessions based on an arbitrary anchor. Finally, and this applies to all decision-making, not just negotiations, practice mindful deliberation. Engage your System 2 thinking. Don't rush into decisions. Take the time to analyze the information, consider the alternatives, and weigh the potential consequences. Slowing down the decision-making process allows you to override the intuitive System 1 response that is so susceptible to the anchoring bias. The anchoring bias isn't something you can completely eliminate. It's a fundamental part of how your brain works. But by understanding its power and by employing these strategies, you can significantly reduce its influence on your negotiations and decisions, leading to more rational, informed, and ultimately more successful outcomes. It's about recognizing that first impressions, while powerful, don't have to dictate your final judgment. It's about taking control of your cognitive processes and making choices that align with your goals and values, rather than being swayed by the subtle yet pervasive pull of the first number you see. The power to make better decisions is, quite literally, in your hand and in your awareness of the anchoring bias.